And now, almost 40 years after forming the band that pioneered synth-pop, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, or OMD, are back with a new album and a big tour, the biggest tour in 30 years. Andy McCluskey, Paul Humphreys. Hiya.
Good afternoon. Hi, Sarah and Nihal. How are you doing?
Very well. It's great to talk to you, and never a bad thing to start an hour listening to that.
Wow, I'm having a bit of a fanboy moment, if you don't mind, with you guys here and listening to Enola Gay. Enola Gay opened up such a world of music to me, and I ended up making music kind of my life, with being a Radio 1 DJ for 12 years, and it starts from music and pretty much that song and Ultravox, and then into the work that was being done with Africa Bombara and the Soul Sonic Force, and then Kraftwerk and all of that. Just brilliant. Thank you. I just want to say a thank you before we start the interview. Sarah, you start the interview, sir, before I gush anymore.
He can't control himself, lads. Get a room.
He's an electro boy. It's okay. It's allowed.
Total electro boy. Total electro boy.
To talk about that, though, that period of time and when you guys formed, what was the music scene like? What was at the forefront of the music scene in those years, Andy, before you really got going?
Well, it was interesting because when Paul and I actually started writing songs together, it was the mid-70s. We were both 16, and it was the height of flared denims and prog rock and lead guitar solos and long hair, and we wanted to do something different, but we didn't have any equipment, so ours was kind of like junk shop and homemade electronic music to begin with. But it was furthest from our mind that we would ever be an actual band, go on stage or release a record. So at the time, we thought we were no hopers because our friends thought we were too.
We'll go back to a time a little bit before that and how you guys met. Something to do with both being naughty at primary school. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, our first stage appearance, I think we were 9. Mm-hmm. And we were both been naughty. We can't quite remember why, but we'd both been naughty, and it was in the school dinner time, and it was kind of our sort of mini detention where we had to stand on stage and watch everyone eat until we were allowed to eat as our punishment. But that was definitely our first stage performance.
Yeah, it was.
Well, stage appearance, I should say.
You must have disagreed about music over the years. What are the recurring disagreements that you've had from that?
Can't we focus on the agreement?
Oh, there we go.
No,
he starts off with compliments and he goes straight for the jugular.
Let's go with the beef. Let's go with the beef.
We are definitely very different people.
Yes.
Paul is much more technical than me. Paul, I think, has a more sort of softer approach to stuff. I am definitely more angular. And I mean, when we work together, I'm known as the butcher and he's known as the surgeon. I chop things up and he puts them back together again.
In great detail.
That's brilliant to know that. The butcher and the surgeon. Well, there's a future album title if ever I heard one.
Yeah, it might be the next album.
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing that I loved about what you guys did, and still love what you do, is finding the soul in the machine, is bringing something heartfelt out of machines, which I guess there was a lot of snobbery against electronica.
Yeah, I mean,
initially.
When we first started out, I mean, synthesizers were not considered a real instrument, and we kind of battled against that people thought that, the machines wrote the song, and we wish they did, because we had to still write the songs, but it was considered sort of cold and sort of heartless music.
Yeah, it's got a great text from Ian just on that. It says, in some ways, the early synth hits were more futuristic than the ones that are around today. Just listening back to Enola Gay.
We'll take that as another compliment.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that we liked the idea of synthesizers in electronic music because it gave us the opportunity to try to do something different. And that was the ethos, to try to challenge ourselves and write intellectual, or some would say pseudo-intellectual subject matter. But yeah, you know what? In hindsight, we chose electronics, and yet we always were quite human, quite emotional. Yes. And actually, the interface between the two, the kind of the juxtaposition, the tension, is basically the kind of melancholy sound of our music. It was totally accidental. We didn't sit down at 16 and go, we're going to juxtapose the machinery and the humans. But that's what happened.
But it's your voice as well, you see. That's what it is for me. You've got such a kind of creatively and emotional sounding voice that against the backdrop of the machines, I think that it's the juxtaposition of those two things that you sound very human, if you know what I mean.
Well, thank you, but I think it is. They work together. They highlight each other. That's that's what we do, and that's what we continue to do.
Let's have a little listen to something from the new album. This is The Punishment of Luxury.
So good.
So lush.
You could breakdance to that. Arthur Baker vibes.
Could if I was younger.
You could do that.
We could break something dancing to it,
To
yeah.
be honest, I think we're all in the same boat there.
Trust me, I'm nursing a bad back at the moment, so trust me, I know exactly what that is. So good. So good. And when you go back into the studio, how influenced are you by the music that you're hearing around you? Because one thing I hear from that is that there's a purity that you could trace right back to the 80s in what you're doing.
Yeah, I do think that, we are switched on to what's going on now, in particularly in electronic music, but also we're influenced by ourselves, really, and our own history. And our very early influences coming out of Germany still sort of haven't left us, really, from our teenage years. Bands like Kraftwerk and Neu and La Düsseldorf and stuff.
Yeah. We do try consciously to construct our songs, because it's always the music comes first, and we usually start with some quite weird, esoteric ideas and sounds. But the thing is, we do like to be musical. We don't just want to do an experiment and say, here it is. So we can jump off a cliff, but by the time we've parachuted down to the ground, the sort of natural DNA of Paul's melodies and my singing has turned into something which is hopefully musical as well as interesting.
So, Paul, that very, very catchy hook there in The Punishment of Luxury, that's you.
Yes, it was actually a song that we wrote for not the last album, but the album before that, and we had the tune and the chords, but we just couldn't get it right for that album or the last album. So it's sort of the oldest track of this record. We sort of wrote it 8 years ago.
Yeah, eco-friendly songwriting. Recycle your melody if the rest of it doesn't work.
That's the way to do it. That is the way to do it.
Never throw away a good idea, is what we...
And are you still using analog synths, or because the technology has caught up with you, you can now...
Before you answer that,
okay.
Are you one of these purists who's going to kick off on us if we tell you that we use soft synths in the box?
Oh, yeah, I was there heckling Dylan, when he went electric. I was there at the Albert Hall throwing paper cups at him. Yeah,
it's interesting that, a lot of the younger electronic musicians are trying to buy on eBay some of the analog synths that we used in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. But ourselves, we're selling those synths to them because we like the
Why is that?
The digital
Don't
stuff.
you remember, 1, they never stay in tune. 2, they weigh a ton.
Yes, they
and 3, when you MIDI them up, they usually don't work anyway. So no, we'll take the ones that are in the computers.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping it clean, because I've seen another headline where you just said analog is starting in B and ending in S.
No, that was a misquote. That was a
right.
misquote.
but what's also using the digital technology. Andy lives in Liverpool, I live in London, so we like to work together. So when we sort of meet up, we don't have to schlep truckloads of synths. We just bring our laptops with us with the song still on inside the box, and it makes it a lot easier to work.
All of these years, though, watching how things have changed in your instruments of choice, that must have been quite something, really, to see how it's developed. Guitars pretty much stay the same, but these things really have changed.
But we call it the tyranny of choice now with our synths, because you've got so many software synths on the laptop now. You've got so many choices. You can actually get lost in the possibilities. So you have to be a good self-editor and just kind of do a sort of small palette of sounds to make your record, because otherwise you forget to write a song and you get lost looking for the possibilities.
Compared to the stuff we started with, because literally when we were 16, we had a bass guitar. Paul used to cannibalise his auntie's radios and take all the circuitry out of them and build things that made noises. And for about 6 months, that was it. Bass guitar and noises through echo machines and fuzz boxes. And then we got a cheap organ that cost 30 quid, an electric piano that cost 25. We did our first 6 gigs without even owning a synth. We finally bought one from my mother's mail order catalogue for $7.76 for 36 weeks. It was really, we had a pile of junk when we first started.
Yeah, budget electronic music.
That's all we had.
Yeah.
How did you punish yourselves luxuriously during the height of OMD madness?
We've been punished quite a lot, really, haven't we?
Go on, Paul. You must have something you bought that was a complete waste. I'll tell you, actually, here you go. We're talking about technology. In 1983, we bought the first programmable computer that had 8 channels and a sampling floppy disks and things. It was made in Australia. It was called a Fairlight CMI.
Oh, I remember Fairlight.
Yeah. It cost, in 1983, it cost £24,000, which was what my parents' house was valued at the time.
Yeah, I remember that was worth a lot more than it is now. I mean,
Yeah, and that Paul, 3 years ago, bought an app that's in his phone that costs $49 that has all the same sounds in the program.
and works exactly the same.
£4,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't run that past your parents, did you, before you made that purchase?
No, it took us a while to admit to that one, actually.
I mean, that is arch geekery.
Where is the Fairlight now?
I ended up selling it to a hire company, actually, probably whilst it was still worth something, because I don't think they're worth
The
anything.
funny thing is, of course, nobody in their right mind wants one now, but the analog synths from the 70s are still worth thousands on eBay.
Yeah.
They are. I remember going to Soulwax. You know those guys? Soulwax
yeah,
and
yeah.
Too Many DJs. And their place in Ghent was full. I mean, every nook and cranny of that house was full of analog synths. That's what they did when they weren't making music. They were online trying to buy the very instruments you guys bought instead of a house back in the 80s.
Yeah. It was, I mean, the funniest thing we had a few years ago when we reformed 10 years ago, because our songs are very sound specific, we did need the specific synthesizers that we had used, and we didn't have them anymore. And this little cheapy thing that we bought from my mother's catalogue, the one we did have didn't work, so we had to buy one off eBay. Unfortunately, neither Paul or I had mentioned this to each other, and we were bidding against each other for the same synth.
We paid a fortune for it in the end.
That is the ultimate geek
We should have
story
been
of
talking.
eBay.
We should have
Totally.
talked.
Oh, the communication lines are open between you guys at all times. Let's have a talking about sound specific. Let's have a listen to another one of the great tracks off The Punishment of Luxury. This is La Mitrailleuse. And that is La Mitrailleuse. What?
Thank you for playing that.
Yeah.
That's
It's-
dangerous of you.
It's my favourite track on the album.
It's the most bonkers track on the
it's
album as well, so thank you for
absolutely
playing it.
And
Fantastic.
the visuals are amazing.
The video is just something else. Why did you have both your hands in the air pumping your fist there, Andy?
But
We
you
can
played
see you.
it.
There's
Because
a-
we didn't expect, of all the tracks on the album you could play, you played that one, which actually, going back to what we were saying earlier, is the most classic and brutal example of my voice and machines, in this case, machine guns. That's all it is. It's just me and the machine guns. It's La Mitrailleuse is a painting by Nevinson from the First World War, arguably the first mechanized slaughter of humans by machinery. So it fits into the sort of things that we write songs about.
And we got a favourite animator to this guy Henning Lederer, this German guy, to animate the painting. So that's kind of in the video.
It's so
That's the
worth
video
looking
for it.
at. Just take a
It's
little
terrific.
Google of that, everybody, if you're listening at the moment. I'm looking at a mitrailleuse now online, and what a brutal looking machine it is.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to imagine in this day and age that people could be persuaded to, at the sound of a whistle, thousands of them, to climb over the top and just be mown down as they slowly walked across no man's land. I mean, I wouldn't do it.
No.
It's unbelievable, but I mean, we're in a strange quandary today because we're really excited because we've just been told our first midweek on the album, and we're not allowed to say it out loud until 4:00 when it's official, but it's very high. And to have a track like that on an album that's very high in the charts is something that we're rather proud of ourselves that we're still swimming against the tide.
Well, the critics absolutely love this album. From what I've seen, I've read
Yeah,
a
we've
lot
been
of
getting
different
great
reviews.
reviews,
Yeah,
yeah.
which must be extremely satisfying at this stage in your careers.
Well, yeah, I mean, next year is our 40th anniversary of our first show at Eric's Club in Liverpool, supporting Joy Division.
Wow.
So we can't believe. I mean, this is our 13th album. We can't believe we're still allowed to make music, really.
Yeah.
And
we're blessed to be able to do it. But the thing is, we took 4 years to make this album. It's when
Yes.
you've made a lot of music, the well of inspiration fills more slowly because you're still looking to do something you haven't done before, and trying to find something you haven't done before is quite hard. But so we have tried really hard to make this album not just a pastiche of our former selves, although it's always going to sound like OMD because it's us. And so it's really, really exciting when you try to push yourself forward and people are still going, yeah, we accept what you're doing. We can hear the effort, but we also resonate with the melody and the music.
Why Le Mitrailleuse on this album? What is it? Because it's brutal. It's a brutal track. It's beautiful. So what brings that up now in your mind?
Well, 3 years ago was the 100th anniversary of the First World War. This painting by Nevinson was from that war, and when I saw it at the Imperial War Museum, excuse me, next to every painting they have a little explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And, excuse me, it was, it just said, industrialised warfare, bodies bent to the will of the machine. And I just went, I am having that.
Yes.
And so the bit you didn't play at the
It's the
front
start.
is me intoning through a vocoder, bend your body to the will of the machine. And it just... We always try to think of something utterly bonkers to try and make music out of. Now, 9 out of 10 of the ideas are utterly bonkers and sound awful, but just occasionally a mad idea actually sounds like music.
How confident are you that an entire new generation of people who've been brought up on electronica, but not the era of electronica that you came through in, are going to gravitate towards this album? And how important is that for you?
I mean, we hope so. When you put an album out there, you don't really know who's going to buy it or listen to it. I mean, one of the great things about the internet for musicians is a blessing and a curse now. It's a curse because, it's reduced the value of music just monetarily, and it's taken a lot of money out of the industry. But the blessing of it is that whole
You can
generations
still
of people
sell out the Royal Albert Hall. That's not too bad, is it?
No, that's true. I mean, we're lucky being OMD
Yeah.
because we already created a brand name in the in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. So, but
We've been, I think that, this whole fact that the people now get their music from different sources has allowed that younger bands who have name-checked us as being influential, their fans kind of naturally go, oh, okay, well, I can find them because I just Google it or hit iTunes or YouTube.
Yeah,
that's
And
right.
so we have seen our demographic expand quite a lot in the last 10 years.
Yeah, we can see it from stage.
The age demographic.
Yeah, we can see a lot of young people in the crowd now, which is great.
Yeah, because I think Enola Gay is like 10 million views on YouTube.
Which is not bad for a bunch of old gimmers, is it?
40 years deep in the game, 10 million views. That is, and the sounds, when I listen to this, album, the sounds are so relevant to today. This does not sound like someone pastiching the 80s electronica. These sounds are so relevant.
Well, we've tried to make it sound modern, but as Andy said before, it's in our sort of DNA to do things in a certain way. So there's still Andy's and my signature all over the record, and it still has that OMD identity. But we've tried to push ourselves forward with sort of more modern electronic sounds that we're hearing with a lot of the, what the younger bands are using.
Erasure and Depeche Mode have also had new albums out in the last 6 months, guys, and they are both political, both quite hard-hitting, quite brutal kind of albums in terms of their analysis of where we are today. You never shy away from politics, clearly, and haven't done in this, particularly with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I think it is, Andy. It's just interesting to me that the view from all three of you guys coming from similar kind of time and soundscapes are, you don't like where we are in the world necessarily.
Yeah, but I think musicians always reflect the human condition, and it's okay to write love songs as well as write about the current geopolitical climate. And there's always something to take issue with. There's fears now, obviously, you've got certain nuclear issues with the North Koreans, you've got Trump in the White House, but, we grew up in the 70s with strikes and blackouts, and then we had Thatcherism, and, we were expecting somebody until 1989 to press the red button and we'd all be blown up anyway in the Cold War. There's always been trauma and problems in the world, and it's okay to write about them. I don't think musicians very often can dramatically change the world, but you can mirror what's going on, you can comment on it
and highlight
and that, I think, is your role.
Just got a great text on a completely different subject. Says, listening to a great interview with OMD, which reminded me of a story my grandmother told us, that my grandfather, Dick Nutt, real name, took the photograph for the album cover organisation, just Googled it, and it is indeed his photograph.
Oh my gosh!
Imagine
really?
that.
Yeah, it's I think it's on the island of Skye, and I think our sleeve designer decided that the second album was a lot darker and bleaker, and so just chose a photograph from an archive. So it was by Dick Nutt. Do you want to know a funny story, though?
Yes.
One of our fans a few years ago from New Zealand flew all the way over to the Isle of Skye, found the stream in exactly the same place where the photograph was taken with the hill in the background, took the photograph and then compared it to the original from 30 odd years ago and numbered all of the rocks in the stream, pointing out which ones had moved.
You are absolutely taking the mick.
It doesn't get more nerdy than that, does it?
So there you go. But I didn't know who'd done the original photograph, so that's interesting.
That is super fan.
Yeah.
And do you know, it says, funny old world, it says, album released in 1980. My grandfather died in 1981 of a brain tumour. But you know what? I think he just didn't realise that it was, didn't know if it was a true story or apocryphal from his grandmum, and now today has just been reminded, listening to you, and has Googled it. Yeah. The wonderful world of the internet has realised that is indeed true. There are lovely texts. Paul from Chingford says, Architecture and Morality is one of the greatest albums ever made, and I've seen OMD a few times.
Very kind.
Now, this means nothing to me, but you'll probably know what this means.
Oh, Vienna.
Russ in Birkenhead said, hi, Paul and Andy, do you know when, is this a train? 633-003 is going to be put back in its rightful place?
It's a telephone box. There's been a massive hoo-ha about it. It was removed by BT 2 weeks ago, and social media went ballistic because we wrote a song, our second single, called Red Frame White Light, about that telephone box, because it was our office when we were kids, because we didn't have telephones at home, and so there's a campaign to have it restored.
Well, instead of counting rocks in a stream, they could have been there protesting and putting their energies to much better use.
New Zealanders.
Quite frankly.
Yeah, but the thing is, nobody mentioned it, and the council turned down the offer from BT to adopt it for £1, only to now do a swift U-turn and try and buy it back from them because there's been such a stink.
At the price of about £3,000, I think.
Yes, ouch.
Can I ask you, as advice to bands who go through that period of success, and then there is a period of perhaps self-reflection where the business side of it and the artistic side of it part ways, and having to deal with that? How do you deal with that?
We dealt with it very badly.
We did.
Because we never expected or intended to actually be in a band that was making records. To begin with, it was great fun, and we did it all by our own rules. But slowly and surely and unconsciously, we turned into the type of band that was on the treadmill, being asked to make records when we just spent 9 months on the road. And we lost the plot. We were exhausted. Also, it didn't help that we, I know people hate it when musicians whinge about money, but the contract we signed, we earned, give you an example, we sold 20 million singles and 10 million albums in the 80s, and by 1989 we owed the record company £1 million, and we weren't buying yachts.
Wow.
So
you could have got a couple of yachts for the price of that Fairlight.
yeah,
We should have bought a yacht instead of the Fairlight.
Yeah, but no. So it is very hard. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to be successful and sell lots of records, suddenly you realise that you're needed everywhere, and the music industry is a very selfish mistress. You've got no time for anything else, and you can completely disappear into just doing it 24 hours a day and forgetting everybody else and everything else in your life, and that's the dangerous moment.
There you go. Souvenir, the biggest UK hit for Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. They are with us. But, and here's a question from Tracy in London. Do OMD still have Winston, the tape machine from their early live shows? Andy, Paul, do you have Winston still?
Winston is in a museum in Liverpool in a glass box. We did get him out recently, didn't we?
We played at the Museum of Liverpool, and we got him out, dusted him down, and used him for the first few tracks when we played in the museum. But
he still worked.
Did he start first time?
Good.
No, he needed a little bit of encouragement. But he's almost as old as us, and we don't start first time in the morning either.
Exactly.
Well, easy, it's the family show.
Honestly, though, listening back to that as well, it's still kind of, it does a special something to me, that track. There's something so
Careful, it's a family show.
I know, sorry. It's melancholy.
Touché.
More melancholy than...
Yeah, well, we do melancholy as well as
you
sort of
do.
aggressive pop music as well.
You do, but that's the surgeon at work there in that melody. It's absolutely beautiful. And then the two kind of noises that come after it, I've always thought it was really brave. I'm sort of sorry for calling them noises, but I don't know a better word.
The choral sounds, you mean, in the middle?
Thank you. That's why you bet against each other on eBay and I don't.
The human voice described on Five as
not
noises.
You, Razzie.
No, but they were choirs. They're choir samples. The whole track was actually built by Paul out of choir sample loops.
So that bit that's ever so slightly not the note that you would expect it to be. Just yes.
Exactly. It's unexpected, isn't it?
It's so unexpected. And I always just have listened to that track thinking that was brave and that works. How?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of our singles were quite brave. I mean, like The Maid of Orleans, Joan of Arc as well. That started with like a minute of noises and distortions before the whole song started. I mean, most of our songs from day one started as experiments, but the more we worked on them, the more they became sort of more commercial. But, you know, pretty much still today we start with an experiment and then we keep building up and building it up, and the very last thing we put on our songs is quite often the tune that is the hook or the vocal tune, which is the melody.
That? Why does that go on at the very end?
Because we can only get inspired when we sit down and actually start with something that interests us. We do not sit down with a piano or a guitar and just play some chords. And we can't start with the words, because then you end up with what we consider to be rather boring, bland music that's just there to support the words. So for us, the words grow out of the track that we've created first. That's the way, but that just works for us. Other people do it different ways. Everybody's got a different way, but that's the way.
So it's a soundscape first and foremost.
Yeah,
exactly. And then, I mean, sometimes, particularly I have ideas that I want to write about. You know, I'm interested in this. I'll make a few notes on that. And I am a geek. I start researching things it used to be in libraries. Now it's on the internet, and start putting together ideas. And then hopefully somewhere down the line you'll go, we've got a piece of music. Maybe I could sing about that on it, and you try it out. But that's the music has to be interesting first.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Atomic Kitten.
Yeah,
because that is fascinating to me. that
Remember, it's a family show, Nihal.
As I'm keeping told, that's one of the things I had to sign when I joined Five Live. Tell me how that came about, your interest in doing a project like that.
Kraftwerk.
Oh, okay, naturally. Well, that answers that question.
Yeah,
Then we can move on. We can move on.
Explain. We are friends with pretty good friends with two of the guys from Kraftwerk, Karl Bartos and Wolfgang Fleur.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I was... Actually, sorry, not name drop it.
That is so amazing that you even know them, let alone friends with them.
Listen, how do you think we feel? You know, we were seeing them when we were kids, and then they came to see it. I mean, when they came,
idols.
When they came to see us in 1982 at the Zecker Club in Bochum, it was like God coming to see you.
It really was.
We have never been so nervous on stage, just looking at these guys going, I wonder what they think, I wonder what they think. It was...
all four of them were dressed in black on the front of the balcony, all folded arms and staring at us.
Yeah,
and we were terrified.
Before we talk about Atomic Kitten, then, what are they like? What are they like, the two guys?
Well, we don't know Ralph and Florian terribly well.
We've met them, but we don't
We've
know.
met them. Obviously, Wolfgang and Karl are no longer in the band, actually. We know them better. They're really normal guys who were... following the ethos that was created by Ralph Foote. I mean, I think everybody knows, really, Kraftwerk is Ralph's idea. It's Ralph's way. He's the only one still left in the band. And now he's kind of polishing their legacy, which is fine because it's a great legacy. I don't think they'll ever do another record, but they are wonderful. But Ralph has a very strict idea about what he's doing. And the other guys, you know, did it because that was their job. I mean, I think, you know, Wolfgang had some very funny stories about, you know, very unrobotic things on tour, which we won't share.
We won't share.
It's a family show for the fifth time.
As we know, it's a family show.
Save it for the book, boys. Save it for the
How
book.
does that then, we've
Right.
cut
I'll go
across,
back
lead
to-
into
yeah.
Atomic
Yes,
Kitten?
my apologies to Atomic Kitten fans who suddenly had to wait a few minutes when we talked about Kraftwerk. Again, a sentence I never thought I'd hear myself say.
I'm talking with Karl Bartos saying, right, that's it. OMD is considered past its sell-by date. I'm banging my head against a brick wall, but I'm conceited enough to think I can still write some songs. So I'm going to write some songs and give them to other people. And he said, don't give them to your publishers because you've got no control. He said, so Ralph said to me, Karl said to me, create a vehicle for your songs. And I said, well, what sort of vehicle? He said, well, what's the best pop group for manufactured pop? And I said, three-piece girl band, the Supremes, Bananarama, the Ronettes. He said, create a three-piece girl band. Kraftwerk invented Atomic Kitten.
So good.
You never thought you'd hear that, did you?
Who would have thought that?
Did the girls know that?
Yeah, were they huge Kraftwerk fans? Is that how you found them on fan sites?
Not
Kraftwerk.
exactly, I don't know.
No.
Did they know that that's where it had come from?
That's
Did
what
they
I
know
mean,
that
yeah.
that story?
No.
No.
They
Enjoying the pop dream.
They were just... listen, do you know what? The first couple of years was absolutely fab fun. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. We were all in the studio just writing songs. The girls were singing all their own harmonies, which most pop groups don't do because they just go in for a day and sing the lead vocals. And we created the whole thing from scratch. And nobody wanted to sign them. Then everybody wanted to sign them. Then they got dropped, and then Whole Again came out. It was an amazing journey. And
Did they sign to Innocent? Was it Innocent?
That's right, yeah. And I love the girls hugely. But what I discovered was that the manufactured end of the pop industry is so dirty and backstabbing. It made what I'd known for the previous 20 years seem like it was CBeebies, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, guys, it's an absolute pleasure to
Yeah,
talk
it's
to you.
great.
You're about to embark on your biggest tour in 30 years.
Yeah.
More power to your elbow. So
Looking
people
forward to
can
that.
see right across the UK from pretty much next week or in a while.
No,
a while yet.
It starts in...
Starts in Dublin on the 23rd of October.
October, yeah.
And then
goes through November.
Oh, brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Dublin, what a great place to be starting
Yeah, we
it
love
off.
Dublin.
Who doesn't? Thank you so much. It's great talking to you on the programme today.
Thank you so
really,
much.
Really
It's been a
enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Talk with you.
And The Punishment of Luxury is out now.
And it's very good.
It is.
And it's very high in the chart, but we can't say
Oh,
where.
Yeah, but you can't say.
Clearly number one.
foul
It's
temptress.
Clearly number one. Okay. Look.